Hola, buenos días.
Buenos dias, guys.
Welcome to Cafecito and Crime.
My name is Estella.
And I am Barbie. I think today I'll be Barbie.
Okay, not Barb.
Not Barb or Beyonce. Okay. Anyway, thank you so much for joining us. So today, you are sponsored by me for a episode.
Today's Barbie's episode.
Yay! So I literally went in on this episode and I've been stressing about it. I've had dreams about it.
Oh, it's like that?
It's
okay.
Yeah. And the reason is because I went ahead and did something that anybody that was born around my era, not too long ago, was a very big fan of
the 60s?
Bitch. Or like my daughter says, the 1800s. That was born around my era was a big WWE fan. And the reason is because you only could see 3 channels. And one of them was like either ABC or...
It wasn't it WB antes, right?
WB, that kind of stuff. So that's where you would see the WWF or like the E or whatever.
Wrestling.
Well, it's all that's something that's going to be in here. So we usually tell you guys about how people are trash, but this episode is a little bit different because I feel like it had a lot to do with
mental health.
Yeah. And as myself suffering from mental health, I know, a few people in my family that suffer from mental health. It's very important to see what's going on and kind of be aware. So we're going to get started because it is a long one. We're going to talk about the case of Chris Benoit. Chris Benoit was born Christopher Michael Benoit on May 21st, 1967 in Montreal, Quebec, Canada. So, fun fact about Montreal, Quebec, Canada is this, which is really weird because I actually was going through it and I'm like, okay, am I going to do Montreal? What am I going to do? But here. So, based on what I found on Montreal, Canada's website.
Okay.
Yeah,
Direct from.
It's Montreal is the second largest French-speaking city. Okay. So, in the world after Paris.
Wow.
After Paris. However, most Montrealers, that's what they call themselves.
Yeah.
Especially in downtown, are bilingual.
Yeah.
Many more speak a third language. So in downtown stores, shoppers are greeted with the confident bonjour, a term which is becoming more, or bonjour hi, like together. Bonjour hi.
Oh, cool.
Bonjour hi.
It's like
a term that's like something they put together as one of their things, becoming more and more popular, indicating that they're bilingualism.
So it would be like us saying, like in Spanish, hola, hi.
Hola, hi. I think we should do that from
hola,
now on.
Hi.
Hola, hi.
Sounds like a word that people say in Hawaii.
Yeah.
Hola, hi.
Hola, hi. That's true. So I thought that was a pretty interesting,
cool. Wow.
Interesting fact. To the parents, Michael and Margaret Benoit. So this is Chris's parents. According to his father, Chris was very obsessive and he was totally in love with the idea of becoming a wrestler since a young age and started to prepare himself at the age of 12.
Wow.
Yes, at the age of 12. And his father was the first one to buy him his sets of weights for him to start training. Yeah. In high school, he won numerous awards in wrestling and bodybuilding, and he was focused on becoming a world-class wrestler. After training with one of his idols, he did get some similar fighting styles as his idol. One of them was known as the flying headbutt. So flying headbutt. So what he would do is he would stand on the top of the ring, throw himself head first, and he would make sure that he was headbutting these people.
Oh my God.
Yes, that was one of his signature moves. And he's actually, so my husband and I my husband and I are almost the same age. So he was a big wrestling fan as much as I was. So
I remember when we used to watch it growing up, we when we would watch it, it was WWF.
Yeah. So we go into that a little bit.
Yeah, but I just remember always WWF, con The Rock,
Stone Cold Steve.
And the Undertaker.
Yeah. So, and he did this very often. Like, this was his signature move of
Wait, fighting. I know it's not real. Like, I know it's not real, pero le está dando un vergazo a otro con tu pinche frente, bro.
That's what I thought too, but after reading,
you do like research? Okay.
That's how I found out that the acting might be just the acting from the
storylines,
but the actual fights,
wrestling,
they're actually like really fighting.
Chingazos.
Since he did this very often, he grew in popularity a lot, really fast. So a lot of the times, these were a couple of the names that they had him under. So he was called the Broom. He was called the Canadian Crippler. He was called the Pegasus Kid. At one time, you can see pictures of Chris, because I'm gonna call him Chris because I knew him.
Yeah.
That he had this mask on, but we go into why he was wearing a mask. But he has into this mask, and he was embarrassed because the mask looked like a Pegasus, like Pegasus from freaking Hercules and shit.
Yeah.
So he was embarrassed of it. But then when people started chanting his name, Pegasus, Pegasus, he kind of was like, okay, it's not that bad.
Pero ¿por qué te ponía la máscara in the first place?
Well, let me go into that. Okay, so they also called him the Rapid Wolverine or just the Crippler. So most of the information that I found, he was called the Crippler, and we're going to go based on the Crippler. That's what his name knows. He was a pro wrestler for 22 years. Oh, 22 years.
From when... Like, when does it say on there, or do you have on there cuando empezó?
Yes, I'm starting.
As professional?
So this is the reason that this is a longer video. Girl,
she thinks she's on YouTube.
Girl, no, I'm sorry. This is the reason that this is a longer episode today, because I go in. Like, I make sure that we talk about everything because of the fact that I want everyone, all of our cafeteras and cafeteros to know his backstory so that you can know that, basically what everybody's saying out there about him is not always what it seems.
Because people just see that, he did what he did, and that's it. But nobody really, people just read headlines, So this is why, if he was a pro wrestler for 22 years, this is why it kind of makes sense at the end. So Chris made his debut in kind of like a smaller version of WWF on November 22nd, 1985. So that's when he started. So he was a part of the WWF. He was a part of WWE in America. And as well, he did fight in Japan. So he was an actual pro wrestler in Japan for a while. And then he came back here because all of this time he was getting ready to become a pro wrestler in the United States. Obviously, there is a WWF in Canada, but to him, he wanted to become a pro wrestler in the United States. It wasn't as big as it was in other places as it was here, right?
Yes, that's correct. So, and then, actually, this is fun fact about Chris. He moved to Mexico, and this is where he started wearing masks.
Porque ya lo hacían mucho.
So the Mexican wrestlers, which lucha libre was life for me for a long time. Like, it was life. Like El Perro Aguayo, like La Máscara Sagrada, like, El Blue Demon. All of these people were like big for me because when I would go to Mexico, whenever I would go get to see my dad, he would take me to wrestling matches.
That's so cool.
So I remember seeing that, and I get chills every time I think about it because I remember sitting there and just screaming at the people and saying go. And so my dad would take me to these. Of course, they were probably not as famous as these guys or whatever. But you
were there.
But I was there. So that's why he actually started wearing the mask.
That's because of that.
Yeah, because of that. So then he actually we're going to talk a little bit about his family life. So he was married twice. His first marriage was to Martina Benoit, and they had 2 children in 1988. By that time, they had 2 children. It was David and Megan. She wanted to have a low profile, so she was like, you know what? I don't know about this going. She wanted to stay in Canada. He wanted to come to the United States and become big. And she was like, you know what? I don't want to
do that.
I want to stay here low profile. So they
did. The kids.
Yeah. So she did file for divorce and was like, you know what? It's fine. She also did mention that Chris did have a bad side effect from using something that a lot of wrestlers use, is steroids. So a lot of the wrestlers, as we know now, and even just people that work out at the gym that want to get
or
bodybuilders, they use steroids, as a mechanism to help them get to where their body needs to be. So a lot of times the steroids would make them a little bit angrier, than other people, but he was a very, very nice person. She talks about how amazing he was. He was an amazing dad. She didn't say not a bad thing about him when he was not on steroids.
Right, pero se separaron, but it was amicable, ¿verdad? Porque
yes.
She wanted to stay in Canada.
She wanted to stay,
and he's like,
no. Well, I kind of go into a little bit about what happened about that in a little bit, but basically she was like, it's too much for me. I do not want to go. So she did also mention they did get divorced in 1997.
Okay.
So then we're going to stop there with his divorce. And then we're going to talk a little bit about his championships. So a lot of the stuff happened. He had 32 championships. He was recognized as one of the WWE's highest record, tying 5 times. So that was a big deal. And he was one of the 4 men, only 4, to have held the gold belt in both WCW and WWE, and alongside of a bigger name that you probably know is Booker T, Goldberg, and The Big Show. So these guys were besides Chris and them, were the only ones that would actually withhold this title. He was widely regarded as one of the most popular and respected, gifted, talented wrestlers in the WWE history. He was one of the only wrestlers that actually won a fight by submission. So it wasn't like common for back then for them to have an actual. So I saw the video because they have videos of his wrestling matches, and I was like, this is perfect. Like, I get to watch wrestling. So he was one of the very little wrestlers that would actually win fights by submission. So that wasn't very common
back then,
but it was getting a little bit more common because it got a little bit gory there for a little bit. And so in 1996, while he was wrestling a match on a on-screen match, Benoit was in a feud with a man by the name of Jimmy Hart. So Jimmy Hart falls into place how? So Jimmy had his own crew. So he had, this is my crew of wrestlers and stuff like that. But also he was a writer for one of the wrestling crews that he has. So he would write his own stuff, but also be in the crew.
The storylines. Okay.
So he was married to a young lady by the name of Nancy Elizabeth Tuffoloni. Daus. Daus.
Tuffoloni.
Okay. So we know she was probably Italian, right? And not only that, but she was born in Boston, Massachusetts.
Oh.
And guess what? Her birthday was May 21st, 1967.
So she...
64.
Okay, so she was older.
She was a little bit older, but they were born on the same day.
Oh, cool.
No, I know, that was cool. So yeah, at the time of at this time, Nancy was a wrestler and she had her career of her own. She was set.
She was set.
So we're going to talk a little bit about Nancy because I feel like in this case, a lot of the times Nancy gets lost because you just know her as Chris Benoit's wife. But she had her own career.
I didn't know that.
Yes. And my husband didn't either. So he was like, what? I had no idea. She was actually known as the Fallen Angel, and people would just call her the Woman. Oh. So she was a fucking badass.
La mujer.
La mujer. You know, la mujer. Yeah. So la mujer, she graduated from high school and she got a job answering for insurance agencies. And she was casted to be in one of the cover of the magazine in June of 1984 called the Wrestling All-Stars.
Okay.
So me fui a ver todo lo que tenía que ver con the Wrestling All-Stars, and this was one of the first magazines que tenían women on the cover, pero así como con bikinis y todo eso, bien sexy.
Pero solamente wrestling?
En ese momento, sí.
Okay. It was called Wrestling All-Stars.
Wrestling All-Stars, so it was one. So I kind of looked her up and stuff. So she was working as a model before that, and then that's when she met Jim. So Jimmy and her, at this time, she went through all of this. She was a wrestling model. Y así es como que conoció al Jimmy, ¿verdad? So she gets married to Jimmy. And then Jimmy was like, well, you can come over here and work in the wrestling rings and you can sell programs. So she was like, you go and you can sell these programs and whatever.
Pero did she want to be part of the wrestling? Because she had her own career, no?
At that time, no tenía nada. At that time, she was still kind of like a model. She was cute,
okay, she hadn't started her wrestling career just yet. Okay, I misunderstood. Okay, got it.
So I was kind of giving you a backstory, and I think I kind of lost you. I'm sorry. So basically, right now, what we're talking about is
her earlies.
Her earlies, yeah. Okay. So she was born on May 21st, 1964, and she had a career of her own. I'm just letting you know. But this is what happened and got her there. So she graduated and, she gets married to Jim. Nancy had been selling programs in Orlando. So by this time she moved from Boston to Orlando y estaba, vendiendo los papelitos cuando entrabas y todo. And in that place is where she actually met another person by the name of Kevin Sullivan. So then Kevin is the one that actually got her, Miss Nancy, into wrestling. He's like, hey, ¿qué onda? Pues you want to be in my crew?
Okay.
Stuff like that. And so then she's like, I don't think so. Like, I really don't want to. But then after a few months, he convinced her and she finally joined Kevin and his entourage, and she took the name The Fallen Angel.
Okay.
And she actually did make it into the ring. And her actual ring debut was in July 7th of 1984. And this was in Florida Championship Wrestling.
Okay.
Okay. So now she's wrestling. She's living the life. Woo, woo, what's up? So.
As a fallen angel.
Ahorita.
Yeah.
And so then when she was a part of Kevin's entourage, which was called themselves the Satanist.
Oh.
That was a little.
That's very, people will remember.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, which included a few more wrestlers and, well, Nancy, of course, and Kevin were a part.
¿Ella era la única mujer en esa entourage?
No era la única. Había otra mujer, no sé cómo se llama because no me importa, pero
we were just talking about Nancy.
Just talking about Nancy.
Okay.
Yeah. And so then a few months later of them hanging out, she ended up getting divorced of
Jimmy?
Yes, of Jimmy, and she ended up marrying Kevin in 1985.
That was fast.
Pues es que, when you got moves to make.
Yeah.
You know? I mean, you gotta go.
You gotta know. You gotta go. You gotta do what you gotta do.
I'm sorry. You gotta do what you gotta do. So she kept on her wrestling name, The Fallen Angel, until around 1987 is when she kept going as that, and then she kept changing it back and forth. So she was an on and off with Kevin and his entourage of wrestlers. So she would go and then she would probably like fight with them or stand by each other, or like she would go and be like, oh, bring them like stuff to hit people with, I don't know if you remember.
Hype man.
Yeah, like the hype man. I don't know if you remember. So before in the WWF, because this is where I base mine, what I saw on, I remember that a lot of they're
just standing on the sides and like screaming,
and stuff like that. So that's basically what she was. And Nancy she actually was able to appear in the WCW on January 22nd of 1996 on an edition of WCW Monday Nitro, as one of the women that would wave for at the Hulk Hogan, and Randy Savage would come on stage. So she was kind of like a hype man once again. So basically, that's another time that she was. In February 1996, she moves from that entourage, and she's done with Jimmy and shit. Kevin, excuse me. So she divorced Jimmy. She's with Kevin, married to Kevin right now.
Oh, se casaron.
Sí, they're married.
Okay.
So they're together. And then she's like, you know what, fuck your entourage. I'm going to be a hype man. So she became a hype man. And then she was hyping up, pinche Hulk Hogan and Randy Savage. And they're all coming onto the stage. And then she joins another entourage of wrestlers that included Chris Benoit.
Okay.
So shortly after that, Nancy began an on-screen love affair with Chris. But they had to act.
It was a storyline for the wrestling, ¿verdad?
Yes. So they were on the love screen, we're in love, but they would make them hold hands, because this is what writers would do.
Yeah, they're playing a role.
They were playing a role. They would hold hands. They would walk out together when he was gonna perform. And then by this time, this was kind of getting a little bit too much.
Like it was coming too real.
Yeah, to where it was coming too real. After that, Chris actually did have a feud with Kevin Sullivan. Because he's like, hey, dude, like, it's becoming too real. Like, you're holding my wife's hand and shit.
Chris and Kevin. Kevin, because by this point, todavía estaba casada con Kevin. But she just wasn't on his entourage.
She wasn't on his entourage. She was fighting alongside Chris. And so in December, on the WWC Saturday Night Live, during a post-match interview with Kevin and the couple, so let's say that interview with Sullivan, the couple joked about how Benoit, like there was people talking about them and whatever. By this time, they're still acting, And so le dice, oh, you're so funny, whatever, Chris, blah, blah, blah. Y luego nada de que le dice, pues yeah, but you took his wife. Like they were like,
oh, okay, like
taking jabs at each other, because according to them, it was an on-screen feud, pero it really wasn't on-screen. Like, it was an actual feud.
Se estaban echando indirectas.
Sí, se estaban echando indirectas, So by this time, they're still going back and forth. And then eventually the couple on-screen relationship developed into a real affair, which it kind of already saw that coming, but whatever. It's often said that Sullivan actually booked his own divorce. That's crazy because you think about it, like he did it to himself. Like he put her on there because Kevin was doing the on-screen writing. So as Jimmy was the writer, but Kevin was also a writer. But he wrote them together and as an affair. So they were like, oh, well, you did your bitch ass that to yourself. You know? So they actually got divorced in 1997. So who else gets divorced in 1997? Chris.
De la muchacha.
De la señora.
De la señora, I forgot her name.
From Canada.
Sí.
Her name.
The one that wanted to be Loki.
Was Ms. Martina.
Ms. Martina.
So they get a divorce in 1997 and she gets a divorce as well. So this gets a little bit worse because what I'm about to tell you, because Kevin Sullivan actually lost his retirement match to Benoit.
Chris.
Yeah.
Wow.
So, I mean, it was kind of like
another slap in the face.
Away, like, fuck, like I took your wife and I took your last, because it was his last retirement fight. And so then I wrote on my notes, burn biscuit. So just saying. The last time that Nancy appeared on Monday Night Nitro was in May of 1997. After that, she was never mentioned again.
Like they just wrote her off?
They wrote her off. I guess
because it was personal.
Yeah, well, I mean, I guess that was kind of an awkward situation. It turns out that Kevin, as we know, Kevin Sullivan retired to start his own career as a writer for WCW. Okay. So since Chris was kind of stole his wife. I mean, se la quitó, ¿verdad? So then he
just stayed in the behind the scenes.
Yeah, eventually he started writing Chris off as well. So like he would, I know it's fucked up, but whatever.
Be a little petty moment there.
Yeah, a little petty moment.
I like petty moments.
So, I mean, he kind of was like, man, fuck you. I'm going to write you off.
You took my wife, you take your career.
That's exactly what I wrote. I said he wrote his ass off of his script. So soon after this, the WWF is when started
becoming so big.
Yeah. And I did want to mention something about Chris. I thought this was so cool because, right now The Rock is so big, but he did actually win a fight against The Rock.
Oh.
Eventually at one point. And then he had a feud with Booker T. So that was a big deal for us because as we all know, we know who Booker T is. And if you don't.
When you say Booker T, I only think about la song de Bad Bunny.
That's what I was saying. I was going to say, well, as you know, even if you don't know who Booker T is, Bad Bunny knows who Booker T is. Yes. So that was a big deal for a wrestling enthusiast as myself. So eventually, in the year 2000, they did get married, and they had their only son. They only had one son. His name was Daniel Christopher Benoit. And they had a good life for a while until the year 2000 when Nancy filed for a divorce. So everything was looking good. By this time, Nancy left her career. Like, she was like, me voy a hacer una wife just for you. So dejó todo su carrera.
She became like a, ¿cómo se dice? Fuck.
Like, not like a housewife, but like a stay-at-home mom.
Yeah.
And they got married, and, they had their son. So by this time, she's managing him, like, ayudándole,
Okay. So she's still working.
She was still working, but just more like behind the scenes.
Yeah. So so she could still take care of their son.
Yeah, but that was a big deal because a lot of people were saying that she did that for the love that she had for Chris, and that she really wanted to,
the best for him.
For the best for him.
Yeah.
They got married in 2000, and then it was crazy because if you see the pictures, the little boy is like walking her down the aisle, and he is adorable. He is so adorable. So then he's 7. My son is 7.
Yeah.
So that kind of was like a big one for me.
So he was 7 when they got married?
No, when he passed away.
Okay.
So then next thing you know, she actually filed for divorce in 2003. So they were married 3 years.
Oh, shit. Everything was good. Fast.
Everything was good. Everything was going great. But the problem is that she started showing a lot of the same things that Ms. Martina was saying about him
when he was on steroids or whatever.
So first of all, because once again, he was a good man. He was wonderful. But when he was on steroids, he acted crazy. But you know what? She gave him another chance. And she lived with him. Pero no se casaron. They were just together.
Okay.
Like, they were like, okay.
I get it. That's fair.
His family was like, her family was like, dude, let's give him a chance, blah, blah, blah. They give him a chance. So then...
Porque si lo quería, right? It's just that...
She did, but it was just like it was too much. It was too much. And I could see that happening.
Yeah.
Because, a lot of the times... Like, it doesn't mean that you're not in love with these people. It was more like...
You got some things you got to figure out before...
Maybe you need your own space. And you need to figure this shit out by your own. So then by this time, we're in 2003. She files for divorce. we're going to stop there for a little bit because we're going to talk a little bit about wrestling and body problems. So as we know, a lot of the wrestlers that do get blows to their bodies, to their heads, to whatever it is, they do not get medical help. So sometimes they might, in that moment when they're wrestling, they might get like blows to the head or might get a concussion and they don't get medical help. So by this time, we're looking at Chris as a 22-year veteran of the wrestling career of wrestling. And guess what happens? He's been getting hit a lot and blah, blah. And
the head and stuff.
Yeah. So throughout his career, we're going to talk about how he was very friendly. As we know, they tell him he was an amazing man. But then he also met a lot of people. So when he was in Mexico wrestling, he met a certain man that I think a lot of people will remember. And he became one of his closest friends. And they were best friends. And his name was Eddie Guerrero. So Eddie Guerrero passed away, as we know as well. Mm-hmm. Chris and Eddie actually became a team. Well, in one of the fights, Chris knocks out Eddie. Like, he knocked him out cold, and then they became friends.
Oh, shit.
So, I mean, that sounds like, ¿sabes qué? Me andas matando a la verga, pero they could be besties, you know?
I mean, work life is work life. Outside of work life, we're besties.
Yeah. So then they became a team of 4 guys, which was Eddie Guerrero. It was, what is this guy's name? He's blonde, and I can't think of his name, but I put it in my notes. I forgot. Oh, Jericho. Mm-hmm. And another guy, I'm pretty sure people that know the Radicals would know that. I'm going to look it up right now real quick. But, you know, they became the Radicals. There was a tag team, right? So let's talk a little bit about Eddie. I'm not going to go too much into Eddie because, you know, Eddie is his own story. Okay, so I have to retract my statement, guys. I apologize. Jericho was not a part of the Radicals. It was a part of there was 3 guys. It was Eddie Guerrero, which was the leader, and then Chris Benoit, a guy named Perry Saturn, and Dean Maleneko. And they were part of a team called the Radicals with the Z.
¿Pero ahí estaban en México?
No, this was when they came back already from Mexico.
Okay.
They had met themselves and they had met each other in Mexico. Es cuando le dio la madre y que they were like, oh, we're besties.
We're besties, yeah.
And then after that, by this time, they're back in the United States. And he was like, hey, we're going to come together and we're going to be a team. Be a team. So I don't know if you know or not, but Eddie was found dead at the age of only 38.
Yeah, I remember that.
So in a hotel room. And the crazy part of this is because they found him with his toothbrush still in his hand. So this means that this boy was in the middle of brushing his teeth.
Cuando le dieron en la madre.
No, le dieron en la madre, no. And his autopsy showed that he died of heart failure.
Oh, shit.
Yeah. So heart failure for a 38 wrestler, which is a lot. And, you know, they work out and all of that. And they were saying that the reason that he had that, and this guy, he did die because of frequent steroid use. What I was reading was that steroid is something that makes your blood thicker. Uh-huh. So then this isn't in dumbed down terms for me because I couldn't understand it myself. So when your blood is thicker in your arteries, it takes it longer for it to flow. So it stopped his heart.
Right. Okay.
And that's because of the steroid use.
Thank you for dumbing it down because I understood that perfectly.
Really? I'm sorry.
Because no, I got it.
I swear, this is the way that I was able to, like, I read it in the medical terms and then I'm like, wait a minute, I don't even fucking know what that means.
I Googled it again for dummies. I'm like, I need help.
Mentita. But anyway, so that's what happened to him. So after he passed away, as I said before, he took it very hard. Like, he was he cried so much, like, to where people were saying he was crying more than Eddie's own family was crying.
Oh, my God.
Yeah. Like, he would sit in the gym and, like, sit there and, like, cry for hours, and people would, like...
That just goes to show how close they were, though, you know? Like, that was his bestie.
Yeah, it was his bestie.
And I feel like también en ese mundo, you need to find somebody that... If you find somebody that understands you perfectly, that you feel like you can, you know, that just knows where you're coming from, you know, and all that stuff.
And then
I bet you
a lot
took
of the
hard.
times, you're right, and a lot of the times tiene mucho que ver con the fact that, you know, everybody in that is out for themselves. Like, you're a wrestler to become a champion for yourself. You know, you're not out there just trying to become
for a team.
No, this is like for myself. So if you find somebody that's with you and wants to push you, that's probably hard to find.
Oh, I'm sure.
Especially with these men that they're on steroids.
Especially like back in those days.
Yeah.
You know,
I mean, and not only that, but like people that want good for you, it's really hard to find that out there sometimes because once again,
till this day,
people are trash.
Yeah, people are trash, and you don't. Trust doesn't come easy. I mean,
trust doesn't come easy.
You don't know who you can really trust.
Yeah, and not only that, but like a lot of the times you think you can trust somebody, luego they're like, never mind, bitch.
Here's some knives to the back.
Oh, the knives. So then by this time...
Also, we know it's not knives, but that's just how we say it. Because
we know it's not knives because it's spelled as a knife.
So that's how we're going to say it.
Anyway, so a lot of the times... people, like I said, people were saying as far as that, he would just cry so much. They actually had a memorial for Eddie, and you can watch this video online. He cried the whole memorial. Aww. Like, they talked to him and asked him,
they were like brothers.
Yeah. They asked him, like, hey, how do you feel about this or whatever it is? And he is bawling, Estela, like the whole time. He is bawling like
no podía ni
hablar. Like, he was like privado and shit, like for real.
Pobrecito.
Yeah, so I mean, bad. He probably didn't have a lot of people at this time, and he had been going through so much with feuds and all this other shit.
La quería
dejar y todo, so it probably hit him hard. So in June 19th of 2007, he faced off against Elijah Burke. So Elijah Burke was a match that he needed to fight in order for him to put Chris in the line for a big fight that was a pay-per-view fight called Vengeance on June 24, 2007. So why is this important? Because this is the fight that he needed to get to, because obviously we already know he was kind of getting written off already. So he needed this. But why did he start getting written off? A lot of the statements that I've heard around was the fact that I read that he stopped like going play, like he wouldn't show up anymore.
He wasn't. He couldn't count on him.
He was not a person that he can count on. So by this time, they're like, "What's going on with you? Like something's up." So mind you, this is June 19th of 2007. Okay, so he was gonna go to the pay-per-view in 2000 and on the 24th. So this is only a little bit of days beforehand. Right?
Yeah.
So what happened was that when he did win, he wasn't excited or anything. Like, he was just like,
okay, I won.
I'm chill. He got, you can see a video about his last fight, and that was his last fight. And
wow.
Yeah. So no one would have never known that, but now we know that was the last time he ever fought, because we go on to this. So once again, they were kind of riding his ass off. Like, okay, dude, you're done. He had lost the previous 2 fights from that. And then on between those 2 fights and stuff, he actually he had to be in a feud with Victoria Guerrero and Eddie Guerrero's nephew, El Chavo. Okay. So he wasn't very comfortable with that. So because Eddie was his best friend, and Victoria Guerrero was his wife, Eddie Guerrero's wife, and his nephew. Yeah. So El Chavo is a big part of this, because El Chavo explains. Now this is where I get Jericho from, because Jericho has a podcast. Shout out to Jericho's podcast that he had El Chavo talk. So I listened to the podcast episode of where he was talking to El Chavo, and El Chavo explains the few hours before and after what happened.
Okay.
So this is going to be coming from El Chavo's mouth.
El nephew de
Eddie Guerrero. Okay. Pero Eddie Guerrero was very close once again to Chris. So then this is a big deal, because Chris and him were very close. So El Chavo and Chris were always traveling together. Okay. According to El Chavo, he said that the week of June the 24th, which was a pay-per-view fight, he was traveling, and they were going to meet over at the airport and rent a car together, and then they would go together to the location. Okay. So they would drive or whatever that they would do every time. Because he's like, if you're, and I'm quoting again El Chavo Guerrero, if you were a wrestler, you would do anything to sleep in your bed at least one night, because they were always traveling. So by this time, they were coming to the South. They were coming to the H. The location that they needed to be at was going to be here in Texas. So Chris lived in Atlanta, and El Chavo lived in California.
Okay.
Right? So that they were going to meet up together and then drive from that meeting point to the location, right? But, El Chavo does say in a lot of the interviews that Chris was very reserved. Like, he didn't talk about where he lived. He didn't tell anybody, like,
home life, nothing.
Nothing. Nobody knew his address. Nobody knew his phone number. Like, he was very reserved.
But I mean, that's just like more than reserved to me personally. It sounds like you're paranoid.
But you know, paranoid, if you look up steroid use, that's one of the side effects.
Okay. So, that makes sense.
Yeah, that makes sense, right? So, el muchacho, pues, no quería que nadie supiera dónde vivía. No les decía nada. Like,
de su familia.
Nadie sabía nada. Tenía hasta P.O. Box. Con eso te digo todo.
Fuck.
So I don't know if people remember P.O. Box, but back in the day, people still use P.O. Box.
Yeah, for sure.
So that's like a centralized area para que nadie sepa dónde vives y tus
y nomás vas al mail, ahí está la box.
So then he moved away from everyone to a rural area, part of Atlanta, that nobody knew where his house was. This is a statement that El Chavo said in the podcast, que dice que antes de que fuera para su casa, he told them, please keep his address confidential because he didn't want anybody to know where he lived. Like, he straight up said, te voy a llevar, pero
cállate el hocico.
Te callas en la boca porque no. You don't tell anybody. And I mean, and I honestly...
Pero vivía solo or he was still with Nancy?
With his family.
Okay,
with Nancy and his son.
Yeah.
So at this time, it's Nancy and his son. Y El Chavo was saying que when they were there, he got up and he cooked for them. Les hizo steaks y todo, you know.
Oh,
yeah,
sounds good.
I know for roast steak sounds good. Les hizo huevos y todo. Like, he was taking good care of it.
Yeah,
y
he was a good
entonces,
host.
para esto, he had slept with him. Y el niño bajó y wanted to meet El Chavo.
Aww.
So he went over there, was like, hey, buddy, you know, how are you? Que no sé qué. Y que él traía, like, I guess quería que le enseñara su belt. Mm-hmm. So traía last belt y le enseñó, I don't know who, I guess wrestlers carry their belts around? I don't know.
I guess if they're going to fight, yeah, because they have to show it to the fight.
They have to show it to the fight or whatever. So, but anyway, and so then he shows him the actual belt and the little boy estaba bien emocionado y todo. And so then by this time it's Saturday. So that was like the week before. By this time we're in Saturday and they had the event to attend to in Beaumont.
Oh, okay? Down the street.
So Chris,
not really down the street, but you know.
Not really down. So Chris did not make it to the event. So they called and checked on him, right? And he didn't answer.
What?
So he doesn't answer and he's like, but then almost immediately he texted him, hey dude, like, are you okay? Blah, blah, blah. He calls him back. And El Chavo states that he sounded down and that he wasn't himself, like como que estaba out of it. And then que le dice, hey, you know, are you gonna be okay? Like, you missed this. He's like, no, wait a minute. I missed my flight. Le dice, this is Chris telling El Chavo. I missed my flight. And he said, why? What's wrong? Le dijo El Chavo.
From Georgia.
From Georgia. Y le dijo El Chavo, oh, it's because Nancy and Daniel have been really sick from a food poisoning.
Okay.
So le dice, I've been in and out of the hospital again. Pero like, you can hear Chavo's like change in demeanor of the way that Chris was talking to him and the way that, you know, like se oía como que estaba bien o cansado, preocupado o hasta mal, ¿verdad?
Just down.
Yeah, down. Entonces le dice, Daniel's been sick and bad with food poisoning and he was, but don't worry, I'm going to catch the next flight.
To Beaumont.
No. To Dallas. Because they were going to meet in Dallas. Remember,
and
they were going to meet and then drive to
Beaumont.
So le dice, cool. You know what? You're right. Let's go ahead and do, you know, you'll be fine. So he's like, I'll be on my way. So they got to Dallas. El Chavo said that he'll wait for him. And even if he had to come back and pick him up, whatever, they were going to be good. So apparently he didn't answer. You know, Chavo is like, you know what? I need to get over himself to the fight. So I'm going to go ahead. And he was with this other gentleman by the name of Scott Armstrong.
Okay.
And Scott Armstrong was a ref.
Okay.
So they all needed to get to the destination. To the fight.
Yeah.
So
which is Beaumont.
Which is in Beaumont.
So they flew to Dallas. Y el Chavo, perdón.
Is in Dallas.
And he's like, okay, I'm going to wait for him here. If I have to leave and then come back for him, I'll do that.
I'll do that. Yeah.
Okay.
So then, pero como Chris was like, I'll meet you guys in
another flight.
I'm going to meet you guys in Houston.
Oh, okay.
So then from Houston, they could drive to Beaumont.
Because he les dijo que he was going to fly to Houston.
Yeah. But by this time, he's telling them, hey, you know what? I don't, my son is sick. My wife is sick. I am like, basically he's distraught. He doesn't know, you know, how to explain to him that he doesn't feel well. And so then Chavo is kind of worried. You know,
but he can hear it in his voice. He can hear it.
So then after he talks to him and tells him, we're going to go, I'll meet you there. El Chavo said that he made it when he was about to hang up with him. By this time, he's telling him, I'm going to catch a new flight. So when he was going to hang up his phone call, he says, Chavo, I love you, man. Aww. And then he says, yeah, I love you too. Entonces Chavo says, it was kind of weird.
Que no le dice, that was,
no, it was something that he would say to him often, but the way that he told him, it was kind of like, you can even hear it in Chavo's voice when you listen to the video, because Chavo is like, he wants to still like, it's still the remembrance of the way he told him. Y que le dijo, you know, I love you. I love you too, bro. You know, you good? Y que le dice, yeah, I'm fine. Le dice, I've just been kind of tired, you know, with Nancy and Daniel, whatever. And so then he's like, okay, well, I'll wait for you here. You know, we're going to make it to the fight. And so then he's like, yeah, le colgó. So then he's like, I didn't feel okay with that.
Like something was off. Like he knew.
Something was off. He's like, no me sentía a gusto. Like I didn't feel like it was okay, like the way he told me. So I called him back. And le contestó.
Okay.
Y le dijo, hey, you good, Chris? Y que le dice él, yeah. Le dice, I'm good. Dice, I'm just tired. You know, I've been in the hospital. Again, le dice lo mismo. La misma historia. I've been in the hospital, you know, with Nancy and Daniel been sick. They have bad food poisoning, blah, blah, blah. They say, okay, well, I'll see you here. I'll wait for you. Now the last time you talked to him.
Oh, my God.
And we're going to leave it right here.
Oh, my God.
I'm sorry. It's because after this, it gets a little bit crazier. And I want to make sure that I talk as much as I can about everything.
And everything's clear.
And everything is clear. So we're going to have a two-parter. Sorry, guys. Y'all know me. I'm a two-parter queen. So, yeah.
If you do an episode, it's going to be 2 parts.
Well, I try not to. Like, I really did. But then you fall into this rabbit hole.
Bitch. There's just like so much information that I'm like, how can...
Dude, but you know, I'm a little bit, like, I know Estela and I are very different. Like, I'm goofy and that's just the way I am. I've always been like that. Pero when I am interested in something, and especially something that was around, that had to do with things that have happened to me, like mental health, dude, I was like... reading and one episode after another episode I'm writing down and then I would go back and edit, and so yeah, we're doing a 2-parter, and I'm sorry I left y'all there, but
that's crazy.
We'll see you next I know videos next week. If please comment on this one, tell us what you think. I know a lot of people will remember this not this episode but this story, this case from back in the early 2000s. And, you know, not too long ago.
Only what?
Cállese el hocico, no diga. So let us know what do you think. Please, thank you so much. We have a lot more followers on Instagram. If you haven't found us on Instagram, we're at Cafecito and Crime
Pod.
And we also, if you want to, we haven't received an email yet.
No, we haven't.
One day we'll. I have faith.
Yeah, that's what you have to keep telling people.
Just one email.
Send us an email.
Say hi.
Hi. Hola, hi.
Hola, hi.
Hola,
That's
hi.
Perfect.
All right, guys. Thank you. Oh, you can send us an email.
Send us an email. Pinches pendejas. Send us an email.
cafecitoandcrimepod@gmail.com.
Yes, so please continue to listen, and we appreciate everyone. Thank you so much.
Have a good one.
Bye.
Bye. Oh, don't be trash.
Bye.